What is up, fantasy footballers? We are 10-5 Fantasy Daily. I am Brandon.
I'm Ryan.
And we are bringing you some of the best fantasy football takes you could ever ask for.
And we've been playing fantasy for years. We love it. And we're just excited to be able to bring our fantasy knowledge to you.
Yep, we're looking to help you guys out here. Sorry we couldn't bring you a week one, but we're going to be here for the rest of the season, so here we are.
And this week this video is going to be our love-hate.
Yep. So let's dive right into it then. Our week 2 love-hates. We're going to start off with the quarterback position here. My first quarterback I love this week is Matt Stafford versus Green Bay. I could come on here and give you all the obvious picks you're expecting to hear, like Wentz versus the Dolphins. But you don't need me to tell you that. You're already going to start Wentz if you have him, or if you don't have Lamar or Pat Mahomes. You're going to start them. But an underdog I love this week is Matt Stafford. Stafford was not a standout in week 1, putting up 16.2 points. But for going against a very proven Bears secondary and just a solid defense all around, without your star wide receiver, that's the production I expected. The Packers secondary is just a solid defense. They are not a top secondary in the league, and especially if Kenny Golladay comes back this week, I expect big production from Stafford.
Yeah. All right, my first love at QB this week is Joe Burrow. The Bengals have the Cleveland Browns this week. It's a Thursday night primetime game. I could see Burrow definitely playing good in primetime, trying to prove to his city that he was worth the number 1 overall pick this year. He played pretty good, I thought, in week 1. He made a couple bad throws, but I'd expect that out of a quarterback who's in his first game in the NFL. And he ended up driving his team down the field on the last possession and putting them in a position where they could have easily won. He ended up even throwing a touchdown pass to A.J. Green. It got called back, but he played pretty good. And he's with the Browns this week. They let up three passing touchdowns from Lamar Jackson last week. He threw almost 80% completion, and they just didn't have any answer for him at all. And I could see him going out and proving to America that he was worth that number 1 overall pick.
If he gets that running game going, it'll be even better for him.
That's true.
Good for fantasy owners.
Absolutely.
All right. My second quarterback love this week is Kirk Cousins versus the Colts. Kirk Cousins looked solid in week 1 versus the Packers, but it wasn't the Kirk Cousins we remember from last year. Kirk threw for 275 and 2 touchdowns and 1 pick on 76% completion percentage. He faces the Colts here in week 2. We've heard a lot of hype about their defense going into the year, all their new additions, but they didn't seem to live up to that hype in week 1 versus the tanking Jaguars with Gardner Minshew. Minshew put up 21 points and finished top 12 in QB scoring for week 1. So expect Kirk to really settle in here in week 2 and put together a very good outing.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that defense in Indy, but we'll see how they bounce back in week 2.
Yep.
My second love at quarterback is Cam Newton. Cam Newton plays Seattle this week, and Seattle's a defense that let Matt Ryan throw for over 450 yards last week, and he kind of had his way with them. And Cam looked good last week in his return. He looked real good. He didn't throw any touchdowns, but he scored 2 on the ground, which in fantasy, that's great. And I thought he took command of the offense and did exactly what he was told to do when he went out there.
All right, now moving on to the running back. The running back loves for week 2. I'm starting off here with Snell Jr. versus the Denver Broncos. Snell saw a career game for him in week 1 when James Conner got hurt. He was already being used in the offense while James Conner was still playing. Figure that's for Mike Tomlin trying to see if Snell can prove himself in that offense. He ended the game with 19 carries for 113 yards. Although he did not find any action in the passing game and did not find the end zone, I expect both of those to change here in week 2, especially if James Conner is ruled out. Big Ben also threw a lot of checkdowns throughout the game, just none of them were to Snell. So I see Snell catching a lot of these, especially if James Conner is ruled out, as I said.
Yeah, if James Conner's out, Snell is definitely going to have his opportunities.
Yeah. Denver has a good front 7, but there's a lot of motion and misdirection going on in the Steelers' offense we saw Monday night, so I expect Snell to still put up good numbers.
My first running back love is Aaron Jones. Last week he rushed 16 times for 65, 66 yards, and he added a touchdown, which we're used to from him. And he ended up catching 4 balls for only 10 yards. But this week, and that was against a Vikings front seven, it's usually pretty strong. And Rodgers had his way with their secondary, and there was really no reason to continue to run the ball. And he's playing the Lions this week, and they run about the middle of the pack in rush defense. But I could see the Packers having a lead for a lot of this game and really trying to run that clock down, and that's where Aaron Jones will really make his money this week. He's always got that touchdown upside.
He's a touchdown machine, proved it last year. He's looking pretty again this year.
Yep.
All right, my second running back I love this week is Darwin Cook versus the Colts. Cook was solid in week 1, but did not keep up with his production from last year. He posted 12 carries for 50 yards and 1 reception on 2 targets, but managed to punch 2 of his 12 carries into the end zone. So I expect the Vikings start off with an early lead here versus the Colts, and that's why I love Dalvin Cook. They're probably going to be using the ground game a lot. 12 carries in week 1, that's just a fluke because they were behind most of the game because Aaron Rodgers was just throwing dots, tearing up that secondary. But I expect them to probably have an early lead here and Dalvin Cook to see a lot more production here in week 2.
Yeah, I can see Dalvin making a good comeback this week.
Mm-hmm.
My second running back love is Raheem Mostert. The San Francisco has the Jets this week, and the Jets are terrible. Mostert carried the ball 15 times last week for 56 yards, but he got his money in the passing game where he reeled in 4 of 6 targets for 95 yards and a touchdown. He had a real explosive play in the first half. He had a catch for 76 yard touchdown, and he looked fast. He looked like he wanted to prove that he's the number 1 back in San Francisco.
Yeah, they said 22.7 miles per hour is what he peaked out on that run.
He was
quick.
flying.
Yeah.
And and then they have the Jets this week, which they're probably going to be the Jets are going to be losing the majority of the game. San Francisco loves to run the ball. It's looking good this week for Raheem Mostert.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to the wide receiver loves for week 2. My first one I got here is Robert Woods versus Philly. Woods saw a lot of production early in the Sunday night thrower versus the Cowboys. Ended the game with 6 receptions and 8 targets for 105 yards. Didn't find the end zone, but he even contributed 1 rush for 14 yards. The Rams' offense looked very good against a solid Cowboys defense, so I expect Robert Woods to play good here. They used a lot of misdirections and motions and tried to find one of their good receivers with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. So Robert Woods always catches a lot of screens too, so they just try to give him the ball and let him make a play. I expect him to probably find the end zone here and put up big numbers once again.
Yep. My first wide receiver love is DeAndre Hopkins. This is kind of an obvious one, especially with his matchup this week, but I just had to throw it on there. Hopkins came out of the gates with his new team and just looked unbelievable. And him and Murray just look like there's no way any team can slow him down. And they did this against the San Francisco defense, who was the 3rd toughest defense against the pass all of last season. So, I mean, they don't look stoppable. And he's got a great matchup this week against the Redskins. So I can he last week he had 14 receptions for 151 yards. And he didn't even find the end zone. So that could have been a higher number for sure. And I can see him getting his first touchdown with his new team this week.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of weapons on that offense, a lot of people. The Washington football team's defense is going to have to focus on here.
Yeah.
All right, my second wide receiver love here for week 2 is Tyree Kill versus the Chargers. Tyree Kill stayed kind of quiet in week 1, only had 5 receptions for 46 yards and a touchdown. For any other wide receiver, this would be a good game. But for Tyreek Hill, we expect more from him. Expect those long plays, big yardages, but he didn't find that in week 1. The Chiefs were up early and Mahomes was spreading the ball all around to everyone. But if we think back to week 1 of last year, this is exactly how it was. Sammy Watkins had probably the best game of his career and everyone wanted him on his fantasy team. But I see Tyreek Hill really putting up big numbers here in week 2. He's going to have to do it early because I expect the Chiefs to be up pretty big here this game. Walk away with it against the Chargers. But I can definitely see Tyree Kill putting up big numbers, and that's why he's on my love list.
My second love at wide receiver is Allen Robinson. He caught 5 of 9 targets Sunday for 74 yards, no touchdown. He played Detroit, who is about middle of the pack again against the pass, and he also had to deal in the first half. Trubisky looked horrible. He was throwing the ball all over the place, and he had to deal with a lot of erratic passes, which we're used to seeing from Trubisky. This week he's got the Giants. I love that matchup. The Steelers went into New York Monday night and torched the Giants. Juju had 2 touchdowns. He looked great. He looks like he's back. I could see Allen Robinson getting in the end zone this week and continuing what he does.
Trubisky had a good week too, so against the Giants secondary, I could see it happening again.
Yep.
All right, moving on to the tight end loves for week 2. My first one is Mark Andrews versus Houston. Andrews was targeted 6 times in the week 1 matchup versus the Browns, hauled in 5 of those targets for 2 touchdowns and 58 yards. Although it will be tough for him to replicate his week 1 end zone production, which means a lot of points, you have to remember that the Ravens were up big at the start of the second half. They had no need to pass the ball. They focused on the ground and pound game for the majority of the second half, and Andrews has a very favorable matchup going up against the Texans, who allowed 10.4 PPR fantasy points versus tight ends last year, and didn't show anything different in week 1, giving up 17 to Travis Kelce. I love Mark Andrews in this matchup, and I see him putting up very big numbers.
Yeah, Mark Andrews is always a threat. My love tight end is Hunter Henry. The Chargers play the Chiefs this week. I can see the Chargers being down the majority of this game, and that's going to force Tyrod Taylor to throw the ball. And what you see a lot with new quarterbacks and new systems, when they love their tight ends, because a lot of the times it's an easy check down. When things aren't happening, they love to go to their tight end. Hunter Henry had 8 targets last week. He caught 5 balls for 73 yards, and I could see him. I could see him getting in the end zone this week for sure. And like I said, they play the Chiefs, so I can see Tyrod throwing the ball around a lot.
All right, moving on to the defenses we love this week. I'm going to keep it short and simple here. I got the Buffalo Bills versus the Dolphins. Why, you might be asking yourself? Because it's the Dolphins. There's no one on that offense. Devontae Parker's most likely not going to play this week, and it's the Bills' defense who's proven themselves just like they did last year. See them messing up the Dolphins this week and putting up a solid defensive number.
Yep. I have the 49ers. They didn't look great in week 1 for sure against the Cardinals, especially they lost, but that's a Cardinals team with a ton of weapons, and I think their offense is going to be one of the best in the league this year. So, I mean, that can happen to any defense. And the main reason I take the 49ers, they play the Jets, and for the same reason as Brandon said, it's the Jets. There's no way. They can't score. They're not good. It's an easy pick right there.
Le'Veon's out, so Frank Gore and Josh Adams?
Yeah.
It's not looking good.
Yeah, no. And, I mean, Darnold, he'll throw a couple balls that will have a chance of being picked off for sure.
Right to the other team. All right, moving on to the hates we got here for week 2. You're not going to want to play these guys because I said so and I know fantasy. So, first quarterback I hate this week is Phillip Rivers versus Minnesota. Phillip Rivers posted a somewhat solid week 1 outing with 363 yards and a touchdown. But while doing that, he also threw 2 picks, and that's versus the Jaguars team, who gave up practically their whole defense to tank this season, and their secondary is just no longer any good. They gave up Boye and Ramsey, so I expect that from Phillip Rivers. You better put up 360 yards. He had ended that game with 14.2 fantasy points. Really not a good week, what you want from a quarterback. But in all honesty, the Colts offense, their run game looks stronger than the pass. We saw Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines both put up good games. There's a lot of their points also came from little checkdowns from Phillip Rivers, but I don't see that continuing throughout the whole year, these little checkdowns. I think the run game is going to be a lot stronger, and I do not expect another Vikings defense performance like last week against the Packers. So I think Phillip Rivers is must sit this week.
Absolutely. My first hate at quarterback is Carson Wentz. He just didn't look good at all last week, especially in the second half. And all the blame does not go on him, obviously. His offensive line went up 8 sacks to the Redskins defense. The Redskins had a good front seven, but 8 sacks is just unacceptable. He looked bad last week. He's got the Rams this week, who have a very good secondary, just very good overall defense this year. They're looking really good. I think Jalen Ramsey's going to cause some problems there. And the offensive line got shredded. I don't see anything turning around for the Eagles here. They lost to the Redskins. I don't see it turning around against the Rams. The Rams look pretty strong. They beat Dallas. They're looking like a contender for sure.
Yep. My second quarterback I hate here in week 2 is Drew Locke versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. He finished with 216 yards and 1 touchdown, which is 13.14 fantasy points, against a very solid Titans secondary. So, we could take that away from him, that it's a very good secondary, but he's going up against the Steelers here in week 2, who also have a very good secondary, a very good rush defense, and a very good pass rush. So I don't expect a lot of production coming out of Drew Locke. He ended the game with no turnovers, too, on Monday night versus the Titans. I expect a few turnovers here versus the Steelers because they've proven themselves as just turnover machines on the defensive side of the ball. And I really don't expect a lot of production from the Denver offense. And I expect pass lanes to be suffocated because that defense is no joke.
Absolutely. My second hate at quarterback is Gardner Minshew. A lot of people probably aren't going to like this, as he came out and was phenomenal in week 1 against the Colts. But I just don't see that continuing. 19 of 20 pass attempts for 173 yards and 3 touchdowns. I cannot see him putting up those kind of numbers again. Granted, not many passing yards, but his completion rate was incredible. He was hitting every pass. Everyone was open. The Colts just didn't look good. And he's got the Titans this week. As Brandon just said, they're a very strong secondary. I can see him not playing very well and the Jaguars getting beat pretty bad this week.
It was a good day for him, but those are numbers that are just so hard to repeat, especially that completion percentage.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yep. All right, moving on to the running backs we hate here in week 2. Todd Gurley versus Dallas is my first one. Gurley had 14 carries for 56 yards and a touchdown in week 1. And that ended up getting him 13.7 points. But that makes that week very touchdown dependent for him. Without that touchdown, 7.7. Are you taking that from your running back, who I'm assuming going to have like RB2-ish? I wouldn't like that at all. It's a very touchdown dependent week for him. It's a very pass heavy offense down there in Atlanta too. So I don't see any weeks of him putting up more than like 20 carries at most, unless they're up very big. They love throwing the ball. Matt Ryan also had 450 yards and only 2 touchdowns, so I expect more touchdowns from him. He didn't throw one until the 4th quarter, and I don't think that will happen again. If he's putting up 450 yards, he's going to end up with more touchdowns. And going against Dallas's front 7, I don't really like it at all, the matchup for him.
Yeah, that's not a good matchup. My first running back hate is Mark Ingram. Ingram ran for 29 yards on 10 carries, which gives him a 2.9 yard per carry average. And it was a game that they absolutely blew the Browns out and were running the ball pretty heavy to run the clock out. And it's more the amount of carries Lamar Jackson takes from this offense, it kills their running backs, and now you're going to put in J.K. Dobbins, who ran the ball 7 times, which is pretty close to the amount of times Mark Ingram ran the ball. But he was more productive with those carries and added 2 touchdowns on the ground. It looks like they want to use J.K. especially towards the goal line because he's a strong back, he's a big dude. But, that takes a lot of the ceiling away from Mark Ingram with no touchdowns. He's going to be very dependent on, I think, like a bigger run during the game, like maybe a 40, 50-yard run. That'll help him out more than touchdowns. It looks like they like J.K. down there.
Not going to be a lot of opportunity for touches in that offense.
Yep.
All right, my second running back I hate here in week 2 is Alvin Kamara versus the Rams. Kamara ended week 1 with 12 carries for 15 yards. If you were going against Kamara in week 1, then I feel bad for you, because I was as well. 2 touchdowns on his 15 carrying yards, and he got 5 receptions for 51 yards. So 2 touchdowns on 70 yards. It's not going to happen again for him, most likely. That's why I don't like him here in week 2, especially with Latavius Murray ended the game with more carries than Kamara. He had 15 carries and played a fair share of time there. I didn't see Kamara touch the field for I think it was 2 straight drives. They just had Latavius Murray in. A lot of weapons on that offense, and I don't expect the Saints to be up the whole game like week 1. The Rams are a contender this year, as Ryan said earlier. So I think more passing will be happening, and that will limit Kamara's touches here.
I like that. My second running back hate is Melvin Gordon. The Broncos have the Steelers this week. Saquon Barkley ran the ball 15 times for 5 yards in week 1 against the Steelers. That's incredible. I wouldn't play any running back against the Steelers at this point unless it's someone you really took early and you have to play them.
Like Barkley, though.
That's true. Barkley's 3rd overall, 2nd overall pick in most drafts. That's incredible. And this is a game I can see the Steelers playing with a lead-in. I think their offense looks good. Their defense looks even better. That takes away a lot of the volume from Melvin Gordon. And especially if Phillip Lindsay's back, then that cuts into even more of his volume. And I can't see him scoring many touchdowns this week against that defense.
All right, moving on to the wide receivers here for week 2. My first wide receiver I hate here is Tyler Lockett versus New England. Although Tyler Lockett played a solid week 1, he brought in 8 of his 8 targets for 92 yards, getting him 17.2 points. It's a solid week for any wide receiver. I think he faces a lot tougher matchup here going against Stephon Gilmore in New England. He's proven he can shut receivers down and just take away targets. So I think Metcalf is going to see a much larger share in the offense this week because who is it, Devin McCourty? Who's your corner too?
Yeah, I think it's McCourty.
Yeah, I see he's not as nearly as good as Stephon Gilmore, so I just think Lockett's going to have himself a tough week here.
Yeah. My first wide receiver hate this week is Cortland Sutton. Once again, he's also playing against the Steelers defense, which I don't want to play anyone against. They looked amazing last week. This is going to be Sutton's first game of the year. I can't see him coming off an injury, a painful injury like he had, and really producing nice numbers against what I think is the best defense in football right now. And yeah, it's his first game of the year, and just continuing the trend of not liking skill position against the Steelers.
My second wide receiver I hate here in week 2 is T.Y. Hilton versus Minnesota. T.Y. brought in 4 receptions for 53 yards in week 1 versus a no-good secondary in Jacksonville. He was targeted 8 times and brought in 4 of those because he tallied 2 drops already in week 1, which is not what I'm really looking for from a wide receiver. That's just frustrating to watch as a fantasy football owner. Rivers will be looking his way a lot versus the Vikings, but I think the Vikings will be able to shut him down. There's not a lot of receiving depth for Indy, so a few doubles and some extra shadows on T.Y. I expect to happen. And I don't think Minnesota, as I said earlier, is going to play that bad on the defensive side of the ball like they did in week 1. Don't think Phillip Rivers compares to Aaron Rodgers in his passing ability, so I expect a rough week for T.Y. Hilton here again, week 2.
My second wide receiver hate, Brandon's not going to like this one because it was one of his loves, but it's Tyree Kill against the Chargers. I don't like Tyreek this week. He didn't play his best in week 1. If it wasn't for his touchdown, he was looking at under 10 fantasy points. He relied on the touchdown. He's playing against a strong Chargers secondary this week, and I think there's so many weapons on in the Chiefs passing game right now, and I think Pat Mahomes is going to spread the ball out. I'm not going to say he's not going to have I'm not going to say he's going to have a horrible day, but I don't like him this week. Don't like where his projection is going to be at this week.
He's a very boomer bust player, so we're just going to have to wait and see.
And then but you got to start him. If it's Tyree Kill, at any time he can score 1 catch, 80 yards, touchdown. That's 15 points in 1 play.
Yep.
So he's has a very high ceiling.
Yep. All right, moving on to the tight ends here. First tight end I hate here in week 2 is Darren Waller versus New Orleans. Waller brought in 6 of his 8 targets for a measly 45 yards for 10.5 points in week 1 versus the Panthers. Saints were ranked a top 10 defense last year against tight ends, so I don't like the matchup for him there on the defensive side of the ball. But also, the Raiders have a lot of offensive weapons. And in week 1, they really tried to focus on the running game. They were up a little bit, but it was never really an out-of-reach game. Josh Jacobs, they let him pound the ball all game. So I'm expecting the Waller's targets and receptions are going to go down a lot from last year because he had an incredible year. Don't think he can sustain that type of play, but I think he's going to have a rough week here against a tough tight end defense in New Orleans.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of Darren Waller this year. My tight end hate is Zack Ertz. He's playing the Rams. I really love the Rams defense. They looked awesome against Dallas. And Dallas should be one of the highest powered offenses in the league, and they really shut them down. Goddard looked awesome last week. It's a tough matchup. It is a tough matchup, but like I said, I think Goddard kind of is going to take over the role on this team as that number 1 tight end, especially down near the red zone. It looks like Carson Wentz loves throwing the ball to Goddard near the end zone. So, I don't see Zack Ertz keeping up with his numbers from last year either. And the Rams let up 2 catches to the Cowboys tight ends last week. And that was 1 to Blake Jarwin, who got hurt, and 1 to, I think it was like their 3rd string. I can't remember his name right now, but 2 total catches by tight ends last week in Dallas.
Good tight end defense. All right, moving on to the defenses here. We hate in week 2. I did not like the Chargers defense for the Chiefs, and I got my reasoning here on this piece of paper. Oh yeah, because it's the Chiefs offense, yeah. It's a no-brainer pick. The Chargers D, they got a few injuries this year, so not going to be able to completely play to that height that they've had, but I just don't like them at all versus the Chiefs offense. Their offense looked incredible on Thursday night in week 1, so I expect them to go out there and do the same stuff all over again this week.
Yeah, I don't see any defense slowing the Chiefs down. My defensive hate this week is the Patriots defense against Seattle. As Brandon said, they do have Stephon Gilmore. He's a lockdown corner. But overall, they had a lot of defensive players opt out this year and aren't playing. I don't think they're the same defense they were last year. They played Miami in week 1. They look good. But, that's Miami. You expect that out of the Patriots defense. This week they have Seattle, which is a terrible matchup, especially after how Seattle played in week 1. They just torched Atlanta's defense.
Everyone was clicking. Chris Carson, DK.
I can see, I think Seattle's offense is going to be great this year, and I wouldn't risk putting the Patriots defense out there against them.
All right, guys. Well, there you have it. It's our love-hate here for week 2. Let us know what you think, if you agree or disagree, down in the comments. And then we're going to...
Hopefully we win a couple of some games this week.
Yeah, I think we do here. I think we got some good love-hates. I'd look into them, but at the end of the day, it's your decision. But just know our decision was right.
Absolutely. Like and subscribe if you guys want to continue watching us.
Yep, give us some feedback. And we're looking forward to bringing you guys videos all year. Probably going to do a start sit here tomorrow or Thursday.
Yep.
So look out for that. All right. Thank you.
I think we nailed it.
I think we did. That was good.